Bimbo Bennett had imagined her wedding night 1,000 times. Never once did those fantasies include three identical Korean men standing in the shadows of a penthouse bedroom, their dark eyes holding promises she couldn't begin to decipher. "Before this night is over," the one in the center said, his voice low and deliberate, "you will scream our names." Bimbo's back found the wall. Her heart was a trapped bird behind her ribs. She'd signed the contract. She'd agreed to marry all three of them to pull her family from the wreckage of debt that was swallowing them whole. But nothing in those 40 pages of legal language had prepared her for this, for the way they looked at her, for the terrifying heat that pooled in her stomach despite every rational thought screaming at her to run. "This was supposed to be a business arrangement," she whispered, pressing her palms flat against the wall behind her. The one on the left stepped forward, his mouth curving into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Business and pleasure have never been mutually exclusive. Before we go any further, besties, hit that subscribe button right now because you are about to witness something that is going to have you absolutely losing your mind. This story gets more intense with every single scene, and you do not want to miss a single moment. Your support is everything to this channel. Now, let's go back to Bimbo. 24 hours before that moment, Bimbo had been sitting in the hallway of Grady Memorial Hospital, watching the fluorescent lights flicker above her while a billing coordinator explained in a very calm, very professional voice that her family owed $460,000 and that their payment plan was no longer sufficient. Her father had suffered a massive stroke 6 weeks earlier. Her mother's alterations shop on the east side of Atlanta barely covered groceries. Her little sister had quietly dropped out of her first semester of college without telling anyone, picking up double shifts at a restaurant to help. Bimbo had found out and cried in her car for 45 minutes before pulling herself together. She was the oldest. She was supposed to fix this. The man in the gray suit appeared like something conjured from desperation itself. He sat down beside her without being invited, set a leather portfolio on his knee, and said, "Miss Bennett, I represent a family that has a proposition for you." The proposition, by any reasonable standard, was insane. 3 brothers, Korean, heirs to one of Seoul's most powerful and most dangerous families. They needed a wife, specifically one wife for all 3 of them, to fulfill the dying wish of their grandmother, a 91-year-old matriarch who wanted to see her grandsons married and settled before she closed her eyes for the last time. The arrangement was legal under a rare provision, the lawyer explained without blinking. 1 year minimum, complete discretion. In return, every cent of her family's medical debt cleared, her father's ongoing care covered indefinitely, her sister's tuition fully funded, and $500,000 deposited into Bimbo's personal account the day the year ended. "Why me?" Bimbo asked. The lawyer adjusted his glasses. "You meet their specific criteria. 24 years old, unmarried, no criminal record, and," he paused just long enough to make it uncomfortable, "inexperienced." Bimbo stared at him. "You mean a virgin. Their grandmother is deeply traditional." She should have stood up, should have laughed in his face and walked back down that hallway. But then a nurse pushed her father past in a wheelchair, and he looked so small, so diminished, nothing like the broad-shouldered man who used to hoist her onto his shoulders at backyard cookouts. And Bimbo picked up the pen. The wedding was almost clinical. A judge, a lawyer, 2 witnesses, and 3 men in matching black suits, whose faces she was too overwhelmed to study properly. Her mother had made her a simple ivory dress on her old Singer machine, working through 2 nights to finish it. Bimbo had worn it and felt like a fraud and a sacrifice at the same time. 3 rings on her finger. 3 dows, 3 husbands. The grandmother had watched from across the room in a wheelchair, satisfaction carved into every line of her ancient face. And now here Bimbo was. Penthouse, Seoul, wall at her back, 3 identical men watching her like she was both a treasure and a meal. "I'm Junho Shin," the one in the center said. He was clearly the one who led. Something in his posture announced it before his words could. "This is Hyun," he gestured left, and Taemin, he gestured right. Bimbo took them in properly for the first time. They were devastatingly, unfairly handsome, sharp jawlines, dark, intense eyes, black hair styled with subtle differences she was only just beginning to notice. Junho's swept cleanly back, Hyun's parted to the left, Taemin's fell slightly forward, softer, less severe. All three stood over 6 feet, broad-shouldered, with the kind of stillness that powerful people practiced. All three were looking at her like she was the only thing in the room.
"I know this feels like too much," Hyun said. His voice was gentler than Junho's, and the difference was striking. "It is too much," Bimbo said. "I don't know you, any of you, and I'm not ready for whatever this is supposed to be tonight." "The contract requires consummation," Junho said, producing his phone without ceremony. "Section 7. The marriage must be legitimate in all applicable ways within the first week to satisfy the conditions of the agreement." Bimbo felt the floor shift beneath her. She'd read the contract. She had, but she'd been sleep-deprived and terrified and sitting in a hospital hallway, and some of that dense legal language had blurred together. "I missed that," she said. "We know," Taemin said quietly. "That's why we're not rushing you. You specifically wanted someone who had never been with anyone. That's disgusting. Do you understand how disgusting that is?" Juno didn't flinch. "Our grandmother's values are not our values. We didn't write the criteria, but we agreed to honor them because she is 91 years old and she has maybe 3 months left, and we owe her this much." "What do you owe her?" Bimbo demanded. The brothers exchanged a glance that carried an entire conversation inside it. "That," Taemin said carefully, "is a longer answer than tonight allows." Bimbo pressed further back against the wall. "I won't do anything tonight. I can't. I need time." The three of them looked at each other again with that silent language of identical siblings. Then Junho nodded once. "Then sit with us. Let us talk. Let us explain what this year is actually going to look like before you make any decisions." Against everything she thought she knew about self-preservation, Bimbo sat. They settled across from her on a sofa that probably cost more than her family's car. She perched on the edge of a chair, arms folded, ready to bolt. "You should know," Junho began, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, "that we take marriage seriously. You are not a transaction to us. You're our wife. In our family, in our culture, that word carries enormous weight. It means you're protected. Anyone who wants to reach you has to go through us first. Anyone who threatens you answers to us. And it means," Taemin finished, his voice softer than his brother's, "that your happiness is our responsibility. Your safety, your well-being, that doesn't disappear when the year ends." "The contract says 1 year," Bimbo said carefully. "After that, I go home with my money and my life." "The contract says minimum 1 year," Junho corrected. "If both parties agree, it can become something else entirely." "You mean actually stay married?" "If love develops," Hyun said simply. "If this becomes something real, yes." Bimbo shook her head slowly. "I don't know you well enough to love you." "No," Taemin agreed, "but you might, and we already know enough about you to believe that you're worth knowing more." "What do you know about me?" Bimbo asked. "We know you love your family more than your own comfort," Junho said. "We know you're sitting here terrified, but you haven't run. We know you pushed back on us instead of just submitting. That's more than enough to start with." Taemin stood and crossed toward her slowly, stopping a few feet away. "Can I hold your hand?" he asked. "Just your hand, nothing more." Bimbo stared at him. "Why?" "Because I want to see if you feel what we feel when we're near you." "There's nothing to feel," she said, but her voice wavered on the last word. "Then you have nothing to lose," he said. Slowly, Bimbo uncurled her fingers from her arm and extended her hand. The moment Taemin's fingers wrapped around hers, warmth flooded up her arm and settled somewhere low in her stomach. She actually gasped. Not loudly, but enough. He heard it. "You feel it," he said. "I feel something," she admitted. "That doesn't mean I want to act on it tonight." "Not tonight," Junho said, appearing at her other side. "But you will." Besties, are you seeing this? 3 powerful men completely undone by one woman who hasn't even fully let them in yet. If you're feeling this tension like I am, subscribe right now and drop a comment telling me which brother caught your eye first. Junho, Hyun, or Taemin. I need to know. Let's keep going.
"I need 2 things from you," Bimbo said, pulling her hand back and standing. I need time to adjust, and I need you to be honest with me about who you really are. Junho met her eyes. We're criminals. Our grandfather built the foundation in Busan decades ago. Protection, gambling, smuggling. Our father expanded it. We've diversified further. Real estate, imports, entertainment. Some legitimate, most not. Why are you telling me that? Bimbo asked. Because you're our wife, Bimbo said. Family knows everything. Family is trusted with everything. Family never betrays each other. The weight of those words landed on Bimbo like a heavy coat. I didn't sign up to be part of a crime family. I signed up to pay my father's hospital bills. We know, Taemin said, but you're here now, and the longer you stay, the more you'll understand that there's a difference between the world as it looks from outside and the world as it actually is when you're inside it. I'm still a Bennett, Bimbo said. For now, Junho said. But there was no threat in it, just certainty. Sleep. Tomorrow we'll take you to meet our grandmother. Bimbo went to her room, locked the door, and stood at the window looking out at Seoul sparkling below her. Somewhere across an ocean, her father was sleeping in a private room instead of a shared ward. Her mother wasn't going to lose the shop. Her sister was going back to school. All it had cost was Bimbo. She pressed her fingers to her palm, where Taemin's warmth still lingered, and wondered, terrifyingly, if cost was the right word at all. She barely slept. Sometime after 2 a.m., she heard footsteps in the hall outside her door. They stopped. She held her breath. The knock never came. After a long moment, they retreated. She stared at the ceiling for another hour, wondering about the man who'd checked on her and walked away without disturbing her rest. Morning came with the smell of coffee and something savory drawing her toward the kitchen. She found Hyun at the stove in a simple white t-shirt, moving around the kitchen with the easy confidence of someone who'd cooked there 1,000 times. Taemin was setting the table. Junho sat with a newspaper, already dressed like he had somewhere important to be. You cook, Bimbo said, genuinely surprised. We all do, Taemin said. Our mother insisted on it. The temperature in the room shifted by several degrees. Where is she? Bimbo asked. Junho set down his newspaper. Dead, 12 years ago. Murdered by people who wanted to hurt our father through her. Bimbo's hand flew to her chest. I'm sorry. We handled it, Hyun said from the stove, his back to her. It took years, but we were thorough. Every person involved is gone. He said it so quietly, so matter-of-factly, that it took Bimbo a second to understand what he meant. Then the understanding settled in her chest like cold water. You're afraid of us again, Taemin observed, watching her face. I'm adjusting, Bimbo said carefully. There's a difference. The drive to the Shin family estate in Gangnam was 40 minutes of Bimbo pressing her fingers together in her lap, while the brothers quietly prepared her. The estate was massive, traditional architecture behind high walls and discreet modern security, koi ponds and stone paths, and the kind of stillness that old money cultivated. Grandmother Shin occupied a room that felt like a throne room. She sat upright in a carved wooden chair, dressed in a deep blue hanbok, white hair pinned severely at the back of her head. Her eyes were alert and sharp, and they moved over Bimbo the way a jeweler examined a stone. So this is the girl, she said in Korean. Junho translated quietly at her ear. She's striking, the grandmother continued. Good posture, strong. She looks like a woman who has survived things. Bimbo kept her expression neutral and her spine straight. Does she speak Korean? Not yet, Junho answered. We'll teach her. Grandmother switched to accented English without warning. Come here, girl. Bimbo approached, her pulse loud in her own ears. The old woman reached out and took her hand, examining it with clinical precision. You came from nothing. My family isn't wealthy, no, Bimbo said evenly. Don't soften it. I respect honesty more than manners. You signed this contract to save your family from a disaster. Yes. Do you love my grandsons? Bimbo felt all three brothers tense behind her. I don't know them well enough to love them yet, but I'm committed to this marriage. I take the commitment seriously." Grandmother's eyes narrowed. "For how long? 1 year, as your contract specifies?" Bimbo's blood cooled. "You know about the contract?" "I know everything," grandmother said. "I'm dying, not senile. I approved the contract. A woman who signs a clear agreement is more trustworthy than a woman who claims love while pursuing fortune." She leaned forward. "But the contract isn't enough for me. I want an amendment signed today. Pregnancy within the first 6 months, or the financial terms are suspended." The room became very still. "That is not what I agreed to," Bimbo said, her voice steady despite the roaring in her ears. "What you agreed to was whatever I decide," grandmother said coolly. "Your father's care can be withdrawn. Your family's debts can be reinstated. Your sister goes back to waiting tables. You want to negotiate?" Bimbo felt tears burn the back of her eyes. The cruelty of it, the trap of it, the way every door seemed to close at once. She stood up and walked out of the room. She didn't decide to, she just did, her legs carrying her through the compound, through a garden door and out into cold air between shaped hedges, vision blurring. Strong hands caught her shoulders. "Bimbo," Junho's voice, "stop. Let me go." She was crying and furious about it. "I can't be a broodmare. I can't do this. I can't be trapped any further than I already am." "You won't be," he said firmly, turning her to face him. "She said she'd pull my father's care." "She won't," Hyun said, appearing on her other side. "You'd go against her?" Bimbo asked, looking between them. "Your own grandmother?" "For you," Taemin said behind her, his hand gentle on her back. "But she's dying. She's your family." "So are you," Junho said, "and we protect family, even from each other." They walked back into the ancestral house together, the 3 brothers forming a wall around her. Grandmother sat exactly where they'd left her, unsurprised. "Done with your feelings?" she asked. "The pregnancy amendment will not be added to the contract. Bimbo will have children if and when she chooses, not on a schedule, not under threat." "You dare!" "You taught us to protect what's ours. She's ours. That instruction applies now." Silence stretched like a held breath. And then the old woman laughed, a dry, papery sound. "Finally, I have been waiting for you 3 to show your spines." She folded her hands in her lap. "It was a test, you dramatic boys. I wanted to know if you would choose her. You did. That tells me everything I need to know."
Bimbo stared at her. "You were testing them." "The pregnancy demand is real," grandmother clarified. "I do want great-grandchildren, but I will not force them. I wanted to see whether my grandsons would protect a woman they've known less than a week as fiercely as they protect each other. They did." She gestured, and a servant appeared with a small lacquered box. "This belonged to my husband's mother. 6 generations of Shin wives have worn it. I give it to you now." Inside the box was a bracelet of deep green jade, intricately carved with characters Bimbo couldn't read. "It means protection," grandmother said. "It means you belong to this family. It means I accept you, not as a contract bride, as family." She looked at Bimbo steadily. "You won't leave in a year. I've watched people fall in love for 91 years. I know what the beginning of it looks like when I'm watching it happen in front of me." Bimbo had no answer for that. She didn't sleep much that night either, but for entirely different reasons. The days that followed were a study in restraint. The brothers circled her with a kind of controlled patience that was somehow more overwhelming than urgency would have been. Junho's hand at the small of her back when they passed in the hallway. Hyun's thigh against hers at dinner, warm and deliberate. Taemin finding reasons to touch her hair, her hand, the curve of her shoulder. Each contact brief, each one electric. "Why do I feel like prey?" she said to Taemin on the second evening, standing on the balcony with Seoul glittering beneath them like a second sky. "Because you're not ready to admit you're also hunting," he said simply. She turned to look at him. He was close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and clean that made her want to lean in. "What have you been thinking about?" he asked. "Things I don't have vocabulary for," she admitted.
He reached up and tucked a lock behind her ear. "Tomorrow night," he said, stepping back, "you'll find the vocabulary." Besties, are you still breathing? Because I'm not sure I am. Subscribe right now if you're feeling this tension, and drop a comment telling me what you think Bimbo should do. I'm reading every single one. Let's go. Bimbo barely slept. She lay in the dark and had an honest conversation with herself about fear and want and what the difference was between them. By the time pale light came through her curtains, she had reached a conclusion. She showered slowly, used the expensive oil she'd been saving, wrapped herself in a black silk robe she'd found hanging in her closet. If she was choosing this, she would choose it completely. When she came out, all three brothers were waiting, coordinated clearly, all in dark slacks and white shirts with sleeves rolled up. She was briefly grateful for the distraction of their collective beauty, because it kept her from running. Before anything else, rules, boundaries. Are you ready to hear them? Yes, Bimbo said. You stop us at any time, Hyun said. Any time. One word and everything stops. No anger, no consequences. We'll all be present, Taemin said, but not overwhelming, not for the first time. Throughout the night, we'll each be with you. By morning, you'll belong to all three of us equally. And you trust us to lead, Junho said. Your first time should be taken care of. Surrender control and let us make sure it's good for you. Can you do that? Surrender control? To three men she'd known less than 2 weeks? Yes, Bimbo said, and meant it. They started with breakfast, and even that was part of it. Hyun fed her pieces of mango, watching her face as she took each one from his fingers. Junho controlled the pace of her coffee, the temperature of her food, teaching her body subtly that she could receive from them. Taemin poured water and tipped it to her lips himself. Learning to let us care for you, he explained. That's part of what today is. They led her to a bathroom she hadn't been in before, a massive soaking tub already filled, warm water and jasmine petals floating on the surface. We're going to bathe you, Hyun said, beginning to untie her robe. Her hands flew up. I can do that myself. But you won't, Junho said, moving her hands gently aside. This is about your body learning that our touch means safety, not threat. The robe fell, and Bimbo stood before them and made herself hold still as 3 pairs of identical eyes moved over her with undisguised reverence. Beautiful, Taemin breathed. Perfect, Hyun agreed. Ours, Junho said with a finality that settled into her bones. They undressed to their waists and climbed in with her. What followed was the most intimate experience of Bimbo's life, and nothing explicit had happened yet. Hyun washed her hair, his fingers patient at her scalp until she was limp against the back of the tub. Taemin cleaned her skin with careful hands that learned her without demanding anything. Junho held her hand and said almost nothing, just anchoring her in the moment. Can y'all feel this? The care, the patience, the absolute intention behind everything they're doing? If you're as invested in Bimbo as I am right now, smash that like button and subscribe, and drop me a comment telling me what you think Bimbo should do. I'm reading every single one. Let's continue. They dressed her in a white silk nightgown and served her lunch on the balcony and continued their particular, devastating campaign throughout the afternoon. Films on the couch with Bimbo nestled between them, hands tracing her arms, her hands, the back of her shoulder. Dinner they made together, the 3 of them moving in the kitchen like a single organism, choreographed by years of shared existence. This is how you always are, Bimbo observed. Everything together. Everything, Junho confirmed, including this. As evening deepened, Junho stood and offered his hand. It's time, he said. Bimbo took it. The bedroom was theirs. Black silk sheets, low light, candles, and soft music creating something that felt more like a ritual than seduction. She stood at the foot of the bed and looked at 3 men who were watching her like she was a miracle they hadn't expected. Last chance, Junho said, but his eyes begged her to stay. I'm not leaving, Bimbo said. I want this. I want all of you. Then come here, they said together, and let us show you what it means to be loved by us. Junho kissed her first, deep and slow and completely in charge, his hands in her hair, angling her exactly where he wanted. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing differently. Hyun turned her to him, and his kiss was a question to Junho's command, generous where Junho took, soft where Junho led. By the time Taemin caught her, she was trembling, and his kiss was despair itself, like he'd been waiting his whole life for this specific moment.
"Please," she heard herself say. "Please what?" Junho asked, his hands sliding the nightgown off her shoulders. "I don't know," she admitted. "I've never known what to ask for." "Then we'll teach you," Hyun said, lowering her gently onto the black silk sheets. "We'll teach your body exactly what it wants." Besties, I need you to subscribe right now because what happens next is the most intense scene in this entire story, and you are not prepared. Hit that like button and stay with us. Bimbo is about to discover something about herself that changes absolutely everything. They moved in perfect synchronization, a choreography built from years of knowing each other's rhythms, applied now to learning hers. Taemin settled at her feet, Junho on her right, Hyun on her left. "You're thinking," Hyun observed, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. "I can't stop." "Then let us stop it for you." They touched her everywhere at once, gentle at first, exploratory, learning what made her exhale and what made her catch her breath, what made her hands reach and what made her curl inward. Junho's mouth at her throat, Hyun's hands mapping her sides, Taemin's lips moving up from her ankle, deliberate and unhurried. "Don't hide the sounds," Junho murmured against her skin. "We want every single one." Taemin's mouth found her center, and Bimbo stopped thinking entirely. What he did dismantled her so thoroughly she couldn't have said her own name. Junho and Hyun worked the rest of her in concert, and the pleasure built in crashing, overlapping waves that left her with no room for fear or thought or anything except feeling. "That's it," Junho said when she began to shudder. "Stop fighting it. Let us have it." She screamed, properly, his name and then sounds that weren't words at all, her whole body arching off the silk sheets, the brothers holding her through it, gentle hands steadying her, while pleasure rolled through her in waves that seemed to have no end. "That's one," Junho said with quiet satisfaction. "We promised you more than one." They gave her a moment and then began again. Hyun this time, different from Taemin, more playful, building her up and backing away until she was grabbing at his hair and saying please without any self-consciousness left. "Tell us exactly what you need," he said. "Don't stop," Bimbo said. "Please, Hyun, please don't stop." "She begged," Taemin said approvingly. "We promised she would." Hyun finished what he started, and Bimbo came apart a second time, tears running down her temples from the sheer force of it. "Too much?" Taemin asked, wiping her face gently. "Not enough," she said. "I want more. I want all of you tonight, like you promised." The three brothers looked at each other. Something passed between them. Then they undressed completely, and Bimbo watched with heavy eyes and a body that had forgotten every objection it had ever had. "I'm first," Junho said. "As the eldest, it's my place." He moved over her, his weight grounding rather than threatening. "Look at me," he said. "Not at the ceiling, at me." She met his eyes, dark and intense and filled with something that had no business being there after 2 weeks, but was undeniable regardless. "I'm still scared," she admitted. "I know," he said. "I've got you." He entered her slowly, so carefully, and stopped immediately when she gasped. "Breathe," he said. Hyun's hand found hers. Taemin kissed her temple. The discomfort passed, and then Juno was completely inside her, and she felt impossibly full and impossibly safe. "Okay?" he asked, his control costing him something. "Yes," she said. "Move." He did. Slow at first, letting her body find the rhythm. Hyun's hand slipped between them, finding the place that made everything sharper. Taemin's mouth at her breast. The three of them working together like they'd done this forever. Pleasure rebuilt faster this time, deeper. "More," she heard herself say. "Junho, please, faster." He gave her exactly what she asked for, until she broke a third time, pulling him over the edge with her, his face pressed to her neck, her name on his breath like a prayer.
They gave her a moment, then Hyun, reverent and patient, who spent long minutes relearning her body before settling between her legs. "You're extraordinary," he said quietly. "Whatever you thought you were worth before tonight, understand that 3 men are completely ruined for anyone else because of you." He made love to her with the patience of someone who had nothing to prove and everything to give. She told him what she wanted, and he gave her everything she asked for, until she climbed again and took him with her. Then Taemin, who pulled her up gently, who lay back and said, "On top, your first time should end with you in control." She sank down slowly, the angle completely different, and moved experimentally until she found the rhythm that made her gasp. Hyun and Taemin flanked her, hands roaming her back, adding sensation until she was completely surrounded. When Taemin reached between them, it was over. She shattered completely, her name breaking on her lips, and he followed a moment later, with something like reverence on his face. Afterward, gentle hands, soft voices, someone carrying her to fresh sheets, sleep pulling her under before she could form the words she needed to say. She woke to afternoon sunlight, and Taemin sitting on the edge of the bed with a breakfast tray.
"Almost 2 o'clock," he said. "You slept 14 hours. Bimbo tried to sit up, and every muscle in her body made its presence known. She didn't mind a single one of them. "Where are your brothers?" "Handling business. They didn't want to leave." He set the tray across her lap. Soup, tea, soft bread, orange slices. "They'll be back." Bimbo ate slowly, thinking. Last night had not just been physical. Something had shifted in her in ways she was still mapping. She was still trying to articulate it when her phone buzzed on the bedside table with a message from a number she didn't know. She opened it and felt every warm thing inside her go cold. A photograph, her mother, outside the alterations shop in Atlanta, taken that morning. Below it, "Your new husbands have many enemies, enemies who know how to use the people they love. Walk away now before your family pays for a choice you made." "Taemin." Her voice was barely steady. She showed him the screen. He read it once. His face changed in a way she'd never seen before, something soft going entirely still and sharp and cold. He was on his phone immediately, speaking Korean too quickly for her to follow. "Get dressed," he said. "We need Junho and Hyun now." Within the hour, all 3 brothers were gathered in Junho's office. The men who'd touched her so carefully the night before had been replaced by something precise and lethal. Bimbo watched the transformation and understood, fully and for the first time, what they actually were. "The back organization," Junho said after several calls, his jaw tight. "They've been pushing on our eastern territory for 2 years. They assumed threatening our wife would destabilize us." "It does the opposite," Hyun said flatly. "My mother is in Atlanta," Bimbo said, her voice cracking. "She's just a seamstress. She has nothing to do with any of this." "Which is exactly why they chose her," Taemin said, his hand finding Bimbo's. "They know we'd destroy ourselves to protect you, and they know you'd sacrifice yourself to protect her. It's a pressure play." "So what happens now?" Bimbo asked. "You stay here," Junho said. His voice left no room for negotiation. "Your family is being moved to safety as we speak. You make no contact, send no messages, take no calls from unknown numbers, and we handle the back organization." "Handle?" Bimbo repeated. "You mean kill them?" None of them flinched. "How many people?" "As many as are responsible," Junho said. "And you're comfortable with that?" "No," Hyun said quietly, surprising her. "We are not comfortable with it. We are resolved to it. There is a difference." If you're feeling this weight right now, besties, stay with us. Drop a comment telling me whether you think the brothers deserve redemption, because this story is about to ask that question in the most direct way possible. Subscribe so you don't miss it. The 48 hours that followed were the longest of Bimbo's life. The brothers rotated who stayed with her. Taemin held her the first night while she cried quietly into the dark. Hyun distracted her the second day with movies and food and the kind of steady presence that didn't demand she feel anything specific. Juno was gone both nights.
When he came back on the third morning, she was in the kitchen and she heard the door and turned, and he was standing in the entry wearing blood that wasn't his. She crossed to him without thinking. "Are you hurt?" "It's not mine," he said, stopping her with one hand. "It's over. Your family is safe. All of it is done." "How many?" He looked at her. 19 men directly involved, nothing beyond that. Bimbo sat down at the kitchen table and pressed her hands flat against the surface. 19 people died. 19 people died because they threatened my wife. That is a distinction that matters in this life. He went to shower. Bimbo sat with the number until the others joined her, and then they all sat together in a silence that had weight and texture and nothing easy in it.
"I understand what you did," Bimbo said finally. "I don't know if I can make peace with it, but I understand why." "That's enough," Junho said. "We don't ask you to celebrate it. We ask you to accept that this is what keeping you safe looks like in our world." Bimbo looked at these three identical men, killers and protectors and lovers, the most dangerous and most careful people she'd ever been near. She thought about her mother in her shop, her father breathing steadily, her sister going back to class. "I accept it," she said. "I don't like it, I might never like it, but I accept it." The relief on their faces was enormous. "The contract still ends in 11 months, she added, because she needed to say it. 11 months is a very long time, Taemin said. A lot can happen. "Like what?" "Like you falling in love with us," Hyun said. "Really falling, not just accepting." "I'm not in love with you," Bimbo said. But her voice did not convince a single person in that room, including herself. 6 months later, Bimbo stood in the master bathroom of the Shin penthouse, holding a pregnancy test with a double line on it, the jade bracelet, green and cool, on her wrist, 3 platinum rings on her finger. The contract had been extended indefinitely by mutual agreement 3 months before. She hadn't left. She hadn't wanted to. She opened the bathroom door. Taemin looked up from the book he'd been pretending to read and saw her face and then the test, and he was on his feet before she could speak. "Are we—" he started. "We are," she said. He pulled her in and held her like she was the most valuable thing he'd ever touched. "Junho," he called, his voice breaking open with joy. "Hyun, come here right now." Within seconds, all 3 brothers were crammed in the doorway, staring at the test, at Bimbo, at each other, at the future she was holding in her hand. "Grandmother," Hyun said, tears already running, "she's going to outlive us all out of pure happiness." "Our baby," Junho said, pulling Bimbo against him. "Our family." "I love you," Bimbo said, and she had never meant 3 words more completely. "All 3 of you. I don't know exactly when it happened, but I love you, and I am not leaving." "We know," they said together. "We've known longer than you have," Taemin said against her hair. That night, they held her between them in the dark, and she felt with absolute certainty that the most terrifying decision of her life had led her somewhere she was meant to be. Not despite the danger, not despite the complexity and the blood and the impossible arithmetic of loving 3 people equally. Because of all of it. Because sometimes the life you never planned is the only one that could have ever fit you. If this story wrecked you the way it wrecked me, besties, I need you to do 3 things right now. First, subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story like this one. Second, hit that like button and let the algorithm know you want more intense, emotional, deeply romantic content delivered straight to you. And third, drop a comment telling me which moment hit you hardest. Was it the grandmother's test, the night they claimed her for the first time, or that pregnancy reveal? Every comment means everything and keeps us bringing you these stories every single day. Thank you for staying with Bimbo all the way to the end. She earned her love. So did they. See you in the next one.